Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. In this video, I'm sharing the cutest gift card holder ever, as well as some card baking ideas using the new Totally Awesome collection from Hero Arts. In this collection, we have the tote bag die set. We have the Tiny Treasures stamp and cut, as well as Totes the Best stamp and cut. Both of these have lots of stamps as well as coordinating dies. And then we have the background builder stamp set with lots of different background textures. I'm going to use it for one of my backgrounds, but I'm going to use them mostly to create textures on my tote bags. There's lots of different textures on these backgrounds, so they're fun ones for both backgrounds as well as on the little tote bags. Now, anytime I have a new clear stamp set, I use a white eraser on the stamping surface. This just removes any possible manufacturing residue and it helps the stamp take ink just a little bit better. Once I've used that eraser on there, I use a brush to brush off any possible eraser bits so that we can get a nice clear stamped image from that stamp. And typically when I use any stamp from a set, I just do the entire set. So I know if I've gone back to that set and I've used one of the stamps, I know I've done the entire thing. This only needs to be done before using it the first time. It doesn't need to be done every single time. I'm using some Hammermill Cardstock here to create the background for one of my cards. So I'm just layering the different stamps on that background. I wanted to create a background that has a bunch of those different textures to it, just to create something fun, a little bit unique and unexpected. So as I layer those stamps together to cover some area of my background, I put them so that the edges of the stamps are all together. You can see we have one corner that's not covered, but we'll finish that later. I'm using some old paper distress ink to stamp that background. I want to see my tote bag die cut on the front more than I want to see my background. I like having interesting backgrounds, but I don't want that to be the focus. So I'm using a lighter color, but you could certainly change up the colors if you wanted to. I'm just using a damp cloth to clean my stamp off. Because I've used distress ink, it's dye-based, it's really easy to clean it off, so I don't have to use any special cleaner. And then I changed the orientation of my paper, and I'm going to just move those stamps to fill in the remaining area of my background, and I'll just stamp that rest of it to create that background. Now I am going to do that stamping in exactly the same color. If you wanted to change up the background up even more, you could do them in different colors and create kind of like a block effect with it. But I wanted my background to have that texture, the visual texture, but I didn't want it to have a ton of color to take the attention away from my die cut. And you can see that the different stamps, some of them have more space to them or more of a stamp surface to them, so they're a little bit darker, a little bit more prominent, and some are a little bit more subtle. Now I want to create my sentiments as well as my charms for my card. So I'm going to do the same step for my next two sets. I'm using that white eraser to remove any possible manufacturing residue on that stamp, and then using that brush to remove any eraser bits. I'll arrange some of those stamps on my cardstock before moving on to the next set. For this set here, I'm just picking out a bunch of different sentiments so that I have them ready to go when I'm assembling my cards. I typically like to create all of my sentiments at once and just have them ready to go, ready to grab as I'm creating. I just find it makes it a little bit more streamlined when creating there. Now I know that I'm going to create 4 cards, so I picked 4 different sentiments for them. Some of those sentiments consist of 2 different stamps though, so that's why you'll see more than 4 stamps or 4 sentiment stamps on that piece there. And then I'm going to create some charms for a few of my tote bags. So I repeated the same process with the white eraser and then used a brush to remove any of those eraser bits. And now I'm going to pick my charms for a couple of my bags. There's also some little charm clasps that I'm going to be using for those charms to hang off of the bags. So I picked those. I'm going to heat emboss these with some gold embossing powder. I want them to be a little bit more prominent than just using plain ink with them. So once I have my stamps chosen, I will close my Misti stamping tool in order to stick those stamps on the door. I'm going to be using my embossing powder tool on the surface of my cardstock. This just removes any possible oils from your fingers, that sort of thing, so that when you stamp with the VersaMark ink or whatever your favorite embossing ink is, that embossing powder is going to stick to the ink and not any other things on the cardstock. If by chance you have any embossing powder sticking elsewhere on the cardstock, you can use a soft brush to clean it up before you use your embossing tool to melt that powder. So then I'm going to pour my powder over top, and I'm using some super fine embossing powder. I typically use it when possible, especially for sentiments, because it just gives them some more crispness, more clearness. It just gives it a lot more detail. And especially for these charms as well, because they're tiny, we want to get as much of that detail as possible. So once I've poured that powder off, taken off the excess, put the excess back in the jar, we can use our embossing tool to melt that powder. And it's almost like magic. You see kind of a dull granular look, and once you melt it, it goes to a nice shiny glossy look. Now that we have our pieces embossed, we can pick out the coordinating dies to go with it. And anytime I'm die cutting stamped images, I do like to use some Best Ever Craft tape in order to tape them in place. I want to make sure that my dies stay where I put them. So by taping them in place, once I put them through the die cutting machine, I know that they're going to stay where I place them, and I'm not going to have them moving on me. So I'll tape all of those in place, and then I will die cut all my pieces and have them ready to go for when I'm assembling. Now I want to color my pieces before assembling, so I'm choosing to color them with some Tombow markers. I'm using 991. This is kind of a pale yellow. I'm going to use this for the metallic clasps for my chains, and I'm also going to use it on the coffee cup just to add a little bit of detail to that. Now I'm choosing to use dye-based markers to color them. That embossing is going to resist that dye-based ink from the marker. For the browns, I'm using 977. If you want, you could use another way of coloring. You could do this on watercolor cardstock and watercolor those images. You could color them with Copics as well, but you have to be really careful with that gold embossing powder because the alcohol in Copic markers tends to break down embossing powder, so you'd have to work really, really quickly and carefully. For the pink here, I'm using 703. So I chose to use the Tombow markers simply because there's some very small areas. It's very quick coloring. I don't like using Tombow markers myself for larger areas because it's a dye-based marker. The paper starts to peel fairly quickly, but because these are smaller pieces, I didn't mind using it for these because we're going to be coloring really, really quickly. And I wasn't going to do anything fancy. I wasn't doing blending with them. So now with our accessory pieces and our sentiments ready to go, we're ready to start creating cards. I'm going to create 4 cards. We have 1 die set here, so they're all going to have the tote bag die set, but I'll do them in different color palettes, just a bit of a different color or stamped detail on them just to change them up just a little bit. I'm going to be doing 2 of my cards just as plain cards with those ideas on them, and then 2 as gift card holders, and they're really easy to create gift card holders with them. So I'm going to use that background builder stamp set to create the stamped detail on my die cut pieces. Once again, I'm using the Misti stamping tool in order to hold my die cuts in place. That way I can stamp it multiple times. For some of my stamped images, sometimes I don't get a clear stamping the first time. Sometimes I want to build the ink up just a little bit more. So by using a stamp positioner like this, I can stamp in exactly the same spot multiple times and build that ink up. For the first one, I have my pieces die cut out of Fawn Cardstock as well as Acorn Cardstock, and I'm using one of the stamps from the background builder set with some vintage photo distress ink to stamp that detail on the Fawn Cardstock. This kind of almost looks to me like an animal print, so I thought this would look perfect on that Fawn Cardstock. It also coordinates with the acorn trim pieces for this. Now you could use a darker brown if you wanted, but I didn't want to take too much attention away or make the pattern too dark, so I opted for vintage photo. But if you want the stamped pattern to be darker, you could use ground espresso or scorched timber. That would be an even darker brown. I'm using some liquid glue to glue my pieces together. This way I can easily move them, lift them up if I need to. I always find liquid glue for assembling die cuts is so much easier because you can move and shimmy those pieces in place. And once that glue starts to set, it sits or sets really well and things are not going to fall apart. For the pieces for my card, I'm working on 4 A2 cards here. My mats are going to be trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches, and my upper pieces, my focal pieces, are going to be trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. You can see here my mat has the piece that I die cut my tote bag right out of that piece there. This is just a way to extend your cardstock. Once we have that upper layer on there, plus that tote bag die cut, we're never going to know that anything was cut out of that under layer there, and it just makes your cardstock go a little bit farther, especially with specialty cardstocks. Now for these tote bags, I used regular cardstock for all of them, but if you want to step them up even more, you could use a specialty cardstock. Spellbinders has several different treasured cardstock packs in different metallic tones as well as colors. They would be great for these as well, especially if you have one in a certain color that someone likes. There's also glitter, there's also pearl, so you could really step it up if you want. Now after adding the tote bag to the front of the card, I just added a sentiment to it and my card was done. They're super easy to assemble And now we're ready to start on the second one. So the second one here, I have my pieces trimmed from blush or die cut from blush cardstock, nice light pink. And I have my accent pieces, my handle, the bottom of the bag, die cut out of Acorn Cardstock. I'm using my Misti stamping tool to stamp some pattern into my bag here. Now, because the stamp isn't as big as my die cut, I'm stamping it a couple times. Now, there are two places where the straps cover. I'm using those for where the seams or where the spaces for my stamped images are. That way it looks like I have a complete stamping, but I don't need to really worry about matching up a pattern because the die cut pieces for my straps are going to be completely covering it. Now I'm using the vintage photo once again for this, and I'm only stamping it once again. I'm just looking for that little bit of pattern. It's just going to add visual texture to my die cuts. I'm not necessarily needing it to be very dominant. If you wanted to add the pattern as well as raise texture, this would be a great way to, or a great time to emboss. You could emboss with metallic embossing powder. You could emboss with distress glaze to add that pattern, add that shine, add that dimension, and have it in a color, because distress glaze come in many different colors. So that's a great way to add that texture to it as well. I just wanted the visual texture, so I opted to just go with plain distress ink for that. Once again, I'm going to trim my mat to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. And you can see that I have my handles die cut out of this piece. And again, no one is ever going to know. It's a great secret to have your die cut pieces out of different areas that no one has any idea that there's pieces die cut underneath them. I'm going to glue them to my A2 card base, and then I'm going to glue my upper layer, which was trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches, onto that piece there. Now this one we're going to turn into a gift card holder. It's really, really easy to make this into a gift card holder. This die cut seems to be the perfect size for it. So in order to do this, I'm going to use some 1/4 inch score tape, and I'm just going to put the tape on the 2 sides of the bag as well as the bottom of the bag. Now I don't typically put gift card holders on the fronts of my cards, but sometimes they're a fun way to do it. There's sentiments for this set that work really well. There's one that says it's in the bag, or I can't remember what the other one is. The two that I used with the gift card holder, they just kind of suit that. So it's a fun way to use that tote bag for something that's just a little bit different and a little bit unexpected. You could put this on the inside of the card and put something completely different on the front, but why not put it on the front? There's no reason why you can't, and that little tote bag is the perfect way to carry it. So this one here, I want to use one of my charms because I have a coffee gift card in here. It's actually a Starbucks one. This one's used up. I'm going to put a charm with the coffee cup on there, as well as one of the tassels. I thought the tassel behind that coffee cup just kind of filled it out a little bit more. Now there's many different charms in that set. You could put multiple ones on here. I personally am not the type to put multiple charms on anything. I think it looks a little bit cluttered, but if that's your cup of tea, you absolutely could do that. For my next card, I have my pieces trimmed or die cut with Spruce cardstock as well as Waterfall cardstock. Waterfall cardstock is this lighter one here, and Spruce is going to be the handle and the bottom trim for my bag. I'm using one of the stamps from the Background Builder stamp set to stamp that striped texture, the striped detail on my bag here. And just like my last one, this stamp is not quite big enough for the entire die cut. So I'm going to be stamping it multiple times to get all of that texture on there. I'm using Evergreen Bow Distress Ink to get that texture. It's closest to that Spruce cardstock. So we see the lighter color of the bag, but we have the darker color stamp detail on there. So I'm going to be cleaning off my stamp as well as moving it multiple times. Once again, I'm using the space where the straps go over for the edges of my stamp. This particular one happens to be the perfect size to fill in the middle without going past those strap pieces, and then I can easily do the outside parts. Now another option here, if you have a stamp that's kind of an awkward size, you could just stamp the part that covers the area that you want it to cover. You don't have to ink the entire stamp. That is a great way to do it as well. I also stamped the pocket for the front of the bag. And then I'm ready to add the trim to the top as well as the handles and the little tab on the side. These bags are super easy to put together. I'm putting all of them together on screen so you can see with the repetition. It's really, really easy to put them together. They come together in minutes. And with cardstock colors, the sky's the limit. You can pick and choose different patterns from the background builder set or other stamps or press plates that have background to them. This would look great with some foiled cardstock as well. You can really get creative with it if you want. Once again, for the mat for this, it's trimmed down to 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. The upper layer is trimmed to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. And just like my last couple cards, you can see that I die cut my handle out of my mat. I'm going to be using the score tape once again with this one because I'm going to make another gift card holder in exactly the same way. There's not really a different way you could create a different gift card holder with that tote bag. It just kind of makes sense for it to be in the top, but I love the fact that it fits in there so perfectly. Then we can glue our mat to our card base as well as gluing our upper layer to it, and then add that gift bag to it, or that tote bag to it. Now, there's many different charms, many different sentiments, so you can pick and choose which sentiments you want to go with it that suit the occasion best. Once again, for this one, I'm also putting a Starbucks card or a coffee card in there, but you could easily put it, say, to a spa that someone likes or a bookstore that someone likes. I think this would be really great for like a tote bag for books or whatever. So you could really change up the theme if you wanted to. So once I have the gift card in there, I just added the sentiments to the front, put my acrylic block on there just to hold them down while they're drying, and we have our third card done. I'm going to do one last card. This one here, I'm going to just stamp that pattern on the pocket. I'm going to leave the rest of the bag without any stamped texture on it. You could completely leave the stamps off of here. You don't have to stamp the texture on the bags, but I think it's an easy, simple, quick way to add some visual texture to this. And I used some picked raspberry distress ink on the blush cardstock for this. For this card, my handle as well as the bottom of the bag and the tab were trimmed with or die cut with wildberry cardstock. And once again, we're putting together super simple bag here. I have the rest of my charms for this one. This one has the heart charm that I stamped and embossed, as well as the clasp for holding it on my bag. And then we have a tassel as well. Now those clasps, when you die cut them, they're not wide enough for the handle of the bag. So it's going to sit on there a little bit cockeyed, a little bit crooked. You could use detailed scissors and trim them down a little bit more closely to the stamped image if you wanted to widen that. Another option would be to kind of fake that it was going behind the bag, or just put it, say, or pretend it was on the little tab thing on the left side of the bag. I opted for this particular one to have it going to the side of the bag. Because it goes so far out of my die cut piece, I'm going to not have my tote bag centered in my card so that I don't have my charms outside of the edges of my card. So once again, we have a mat here. This one is the wildberry cardstock that I cut my handle and the bottom of the bag out of. The white cardstock here, I am trimming to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. The wildberry was trimmed to 4 inches by 5 1/4. We're going to glue this to the card base. Now, another option I thought is doing this card as a horizontal card, but the die cut is just a little bit too tall for that, so it doesn't really fit. You'll see that I turn it the other way and end up just putting it the same way that I've had my other cards, as in I'll do a vertical card here because it doesn't actually fit within the edges of the card as a horizontal card either. So once I have that on there, you can see I have it to the side. If that bothers you, once again, you can just move those charms and have them hanging straight down rather than hanging more to the right of the bag. It really just depends on the look that you're going for. Another option here would be to use other die cuts, other stamp sets to stuff in things into that bag. I think that would look absolutely adorable as well. You'll find all of the products that I've used listed and linked down in the description box below. These cards were really so easy to put together, but my favorite ones have to be these ones with the gift cards in them, just because they're a fun way to give gift cards to people. Sometimes people find that gift cards are fairly impersonal, but sometimes that's just the thing that people want. or it's a great way to get someone to treat themselves, someone that you think that doesn't necessarily treat themselves regularly. It's a great way just to give them a little treat in a fun little way that's not just handing them a gift card. Then we have our very first one that has the texture background on the back, as well as our little tote bag. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate all the time that you spend with me. I hope you have a fantastic day.